If Carney does not deliver, the global capital markets have had it with us. I can't say that strongly enough.
And yet
I
can't
will
think
get
of
the heck out of Canada if Carney does not come through in the next 3 weeks.
Well, I'd say that, sorry, just one little aside because it drives me crazy, is I can't find anybody in the political commentariat who understands that, or at least maybe they do and they never mention it. They don't know we're operating in a global capital market. They don't know that we're in competition, to borrow money and all the things you've just alluded to. But as I say, that's just my little pet peeve there. One of the things I'm fond of saying on Money Talks, because there are a lot of different opinions on things, some of them been overly politicized, I think, but I'm dealing in the world of finance and economics, and there's going to be a scorecard. Well, as I say, the scorecard is all that counts, and that's why I'm so pleased to welcome back to the show James Thorne, with Chief Market Strategist for Wellington-Altus. Jim has had a huge, wonderful track record run, including telling us, hey, don't worry, stay in the market. We're going way higher in the S&P, for example, talking to us about Bitcoin, did extremely well with that. He was at our World Outlook conference, I guess it was a couple of years ago, and he just said, how else can I put this? Own this stuff. And of course, people who did are very happy about it. And that's one of the reasons I'm so glad he's going to join us again in February for the World Outlook Conference. And as you heard me say earlier, today is the first day that you can get tickets for it. So take advantage of it. Jim, thanks for finding time for us.
Michael, it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
I want to throw out and just go through an order of stuff that are on people's mind and get your take on it. I'll start with the interest rate decision this past week. We got one in the Federal Reserve, but of course we had ours in Canada, which got more play. Both down 0.25%, both talking about a weaker economy. But can I just ask you straightforward, would you have done more?
Yes, I think Canada is, the next 5 years is going to be very tough for Canada. The lack of an industrial policy by the Trudeau government has really set us on the back foot. I think interest rates have to get down to 1%. Mike, let's be honest here, right? The old way of doing things, the way Canada's done things, is over. We can no longer be competitive in manufacturing cars. Let's just be honest with that. In Ontario, right, because of the political decisions from the last couple of decades, electricity is very expensive. So in an AI world, and even in an advanced manufacturing world, irrespective of the way that we treat global capital in this country, the factors of production are expensive. Why? Because we virtue signal about climate change. And now we've got Bill Gates walking back from it. And so you're sitting there going, okay, so now the reckoning has happened. Well, guess what? The interest rate sensitive sector in this economy has been smoked. 8% unemployment in Ontario, 9% in Toronto. And Tiff Macklin is dithering, thinking a 25 basis point rate cut is going to fix it. My GDP just came out this morning, 6-month annualized, negative 0.2.
Yeah.
That's a recession. Okay? So let's be honest about this. Let's talk about this and realize that there's no going back with President Trump in office.
Well, a couple of things you brought up there. One is that to me, it's just such a huge reflection on poor policy choices that Canada doesn't have some of the cheapest power in the world to power our industry. And Germany's become this poster child for what not to do. And yet I hear the Prime Minister, and I don't want to force you to be overly political here, but I hear the Prime Minister several times echoing what was said before under Prime Minister Trudeau: we want to be like Europe. I want to be like Europe climate-wise. And yet I'm sitting there watching this car wreck that is Germany, UK, France, those kinds of things. And I can't help but bring that up. I mean, it's such a tragedy that we don't have this monster advantage when it comes to cheap power.
Well, and as the governor of the Bank of Canada said, if we don't change, our standard of living is going to drop. So the real question I ask myself is, let's just assume that Mr. Carney is a very smart man, which I think he is. Why is he saying what he's saying where, before we were talking, that the answer and the solution is very simple, right? It's very simple. It's going to take us 5 to 10 years.
Yep.
They go, hey, Mike, you and I remember the CANDU reactor. Canada used to be a leader in nuclear. And here's where it gets a little bit interesting. President Trump in the United States just did a deal for $80 billion with Westinghouse to build nuclear reactors. Do you know who owns Westinghouse? Brookfield, 51%, Cameco, 49%. I don't know. That sounds Canadian to me.
Yeah.
So the real question I have is, is Carney playing this? Because let's be honest, let's go from the realm of solving the problem to the world of politics. His constituents who voted him in was the 416-905 area in southern Ontario. Okay, that's Wokeville, Mike, right? And so does he know what he has to do, but he's got to pander to his constituents? It's going to be very interesting to see because he has the constitutional power to build the pipelines, right? And look at the surveys coming out. We want pipelines. So is this more of him having to deal with the political environment as opposed to the solutions? Because like I will say to you, everybody is walking back from green.
Yes.
Everybody. And so if that is the case, then are we going to not take our rightful place as one of the number one power generators in the world, process our natural resources, and become a leader in artificial intelligence? These are the questions that we need to answer.
Well, I would come back and say, so far the answer is no. I mean, there's been every opportunity, going back to the campaign, Prime Minister Carney clearly stated in one of the leaders' debates that, yes, sort of what you're saying, we have to do a pipeline. Is that goes on a French television debate and changes his mind or says something different. Now sort of on the fence all the time, trying not to give an answer. But in the meantime, Canada's fiscal situation deteriorates. Our economic situation deteriorates, and we're saying no to the number one resource we've got. When you talk about, let's double our non-U.S. exports, I don't think it's that tough to do, but man, it makes it a lot tougher when you don't have oil shipping, back to Asia, for example.
Yeah, what are we going to, as I was saying to somebody else and when I was in New York this week, so what are we going to export? You hear Carney talk about exporting cars?
Yeah.
No, what are we going to export? Well, we're going to export oil and natural gas and materials. How? With what? Right? And so we have, and I don't, the ex-prime minister, has left the building, but I think, and we chatted earlier, I think your point is very profound. I don't think people realize how bad he left the situation.
Yeah.
I don't think we realize how bad Trudeau and Friedland, how bad they were in terms of generating economic policy that made productivity growth negative, that had our per capita GDP drop like a stone, and unwilling to embrace our one competitive advantage. Who would do this? Who would do this? And Mike, if we don't pivot, then the Canadian dollar is going to 65 cents. There are consequences to our decisions, and there are consequences to our election. And Canadians are finally waking up to the fact that virtue signaling is costing us our standard of living.
Well, I look at the recent polls showing, I think it was 34% of Canadians are using their credit card for essentials, for necessary things because they can't afford them otherwise. We look at 53%, can't get within $200 at the end of the month. Like, it's happening. All I'm doing is reinforcing your point. It's happening as we speak. And are we waiting till it goes much higher? I'm also, by the way, in the dilemma when it comes to the prime minister. I've said he's got the easiest act in history to follow. by coming after Justin Trudeau, who is functionally illiterate when it came to economics and finance. Obviously, Mark Carney is not in that boat, so he's fully understanding the consequences. I'm waiting to see if he waits till it gets worse. So to that very constituency you're talking about, he says, I have no choice. We've got to do this. My problem is that the timetable is running out. Like the clock is running on this stuff.
It is, and he hasn't said it recently. But before he was a prime minister, I remember him in an interview way back saying, when you have a crisis, it allows the government to move very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And so, what we're doing now is, again, he's very smart. He knows what he's doing. And so, what we're trying to figure out is, is he going to, we'll find out, November 4th. What I would say to you, though, and I've got to frame this the right way, is the government of Canada's fiscal situation is a lot better than other countries.
Yes.
If he would take some of that balance sheet and do what President Trump did and went to Westinghouse and said, here's, an equivalent, here's $80 billion, build nuclear reactors, that would be a good use for our balance sheet, right?
Yep.
And, that increases the productivity of our economy. Same with pipelines. That's a good use. Same with a 12-month Tidewater port in Churchill, Manitoba. That would be good. But to increase transfer payments, which is what the previous administration did, is setting ourselves back for fiscal ruin. And you and I are old enough to remember what Canada did in the early 80s when Ronald Reagan got it. Uh-huh. And Ronald Reagan basically embraced Robert Mundell, a Canadian, Nobel Prize winner, McGill, the father of the euro, and also the father of supply-side economics. And Ronald Reagan did a big pivot of doing supply-side economics. And what we up here in Canada did, said, we're going to show Reagan, we're going to basically surprise everybody and put Pierre Elliott Trudeau in for one last time. And you know what happened after the end of that? The World Bank, IMF, and Wall Street Journal wrote that Canada is an honorary member of the emerging market. So that's where we're going, right? Yeah. So, as investors, and I know you have a lot of it, that's why gold is so attractive. That's why, commodities are so attractive. Because eventually, Michael, cooler heads are going to prevail. We are a resource superpower, whether we like it or not. How much pain are we going to have to go through to come to the realization that we must embrace what we are strong at? And I'm sorry, I'm in downtown Toronto, right? I'm sorry, Premier Ford, the era of making cars in this country, the era of our industrial policy only being focused on Southern Ontario manufacturing and dairy in Quebec is over.
Let me just come to a couple things you said, just to reinforce one of your points, because it's not made often enough. Debt in and of itself is not a bad idea if it's productive debt, if you're making money off it, like any investment. I've in my life, I've borrowed lots of money at different times, and with the intention of making more money than the cost of borrowing. But that's not what we've been doing. We've been just redistributing. And that is non-productive. It sits like a dead weight on our financial future. And we'll see if this, I suspect Prime Minister Carney acknowledges that. That brings me to my second point, though, Jim. We're going to get a budget Tuesday, November 4th. That has nothing to do with whether the money's spent effectively and efficiently. And I read way too many Auditor General's reports. People will salute the latest, we're going to do this. And then you look inside it and you go, oh my goodness gracious, are there going to be criminal investigations after we saw those tax dollars? Just a reminder that people should know both sides of that.
Yes. What Trudeau and Friedland did with their policies is the private sector was crowded out by the public sector. There are too many government employees in this country. The Prime Minister has talked about austerity measures. And to your point, the proof will be in the pudding. Will he cut enough out of the government? And will he use the balance sheet of the government, which he has? We still have a very good credit rating, even though we've squandered some of it, to take that and put Canada on the front foot and start spending on productive programs that embrace our competitive advantage. Even if that is the case, it's going to take time, and that's why I say the Bank of Canada has to cut more. In the United States, Mike, they said $80 billion to do the nuclear reactors is going to employ about 100,000 people. So could we get let's start building nuclear reactors. Let's start building pipelines. Let's start getting our natural resources going. Let's build the processing plant for rare earths. It's not about that rare earths aren't that rare. It's the willingness to produce them. Same thing with refiners. Let's build refineries in this country and keep the margins in Canada. There, you and I have solved it. Let's put Carney on the other screen. There it is. Yep. It's simple, right? Hard to do because he's got to deal with all the politics. And let's be fair, he's still dealing with the Trudeau cabinet.
Oh, but I'd say, my response to that is I agree with you, but at some point you've got to show the leadership. I understand that David Eby doesn't want a pipeline, on the West Coast. At some point, you got to stand up because you need to send that message, something that you'd fully appreciate, having, literally managed billions of dollars, both sides of the border. Our credibility needs a shot in the arm, and I haven't seen it, especially, again, that the Trump administration has lowered regulatory costs and has lowered taxation. I don't think we can wait anymore. We need some leadership that says this is how we're going to go about it. But again, in my observation from his national speech last week was, given a choice between the private sector and more government intervention, he chose more government intervention.
Yeah, it's interesting because, folks like you and me, we actually watch these speeches, right? And so what was really interesting about juxtaposing the University of Ottawa speech to what he said in New York at the Council of Foreign Relations was completely different.
Yeah.
And he has gotten, and there have been instances, and not the tonality, right? But what I would say to you is, look, we're going to find out, right? We are going to find out really soon. And yes, we need leadership, and we need leadership at the PMO office, and we need leadership at the Bank of Canada. I say this, and I say it with a, not say, I'm going to say that, look, I understand that our economy is too reliant on real estate. I understand that there was a bubble. But if we go through this reckoning process, that's using the Prime Minister's words, and we lose real estate, it is going to get really nasty. So we have got to get rates down so that we do not go into a debt deflation spiral caused by real estate, which is what China is going through right now. So I pick 1%. Maybe it's 1.5%.
Right.
But what if I was, counseling the governor of the Bank of Canada? I would say we need to keep going down until real estate and residential construction can support economic growth. I mean, we talk about housing affordability. Who's going to build when it's so hard to get credit in this country?
Yeah.
Right. And so, and I know that we have an unbalanced economy, but look, folks, we're going to lose Southern Ontario manufacturing. That's why Premier Ford's freaking out. That's why he spent $75 million on an ill-timed commercial. Okay? Yep. And you're sitting here saying, well, why do you think he would do that if the prime minister saw it? Is you're sitting there going, what else? The guy's going to have his manufacturing base wiped out. Give him, let him spend 75 million and have his day in the sun, but it's not going to change the fact that we are not going to assemble cars in this country. Yeah. We might manufacture parts, but we're not going to assemble cars. We are not competitive, right? So let's get honest about this, Mike. And what I said to you earlier is we're not having this call. You and I are having this conversation. CBC's not having this conversation. Yeah. CTV, they have the same 5 guys on, right? The same 5 guys. I mean, I went to the United States for 25 years. Chantal Hébert, she was doing this 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's the same point of view. It's bizarre.
I couldn't agree more. I don't want to have you leave us without talking about the investment side, because one, let me just say your overall call was for, this bull market. We're hitting some of those, what seemed at the time when you were here in February at the World Outlook, really lofty numbers. Hey, we're there. Where are we at right now with the broad market indexes?
Well, we're flirting with about 69 on the S&P. So a couple, because we're talking to Canadian, right? So first, and you kind of put it a little bit, I'll put it more succinctly in investment terms. The honeymoon is over in the capital markets for Mark Carney. The honeymoon is over. The catch-up trade, right, which is a classic global macro trade, by an economy that's going from a socialist economic policy to a more centrist market-based policy. That's why the TSX went up X gold. Okay?
Yes.
That trade is done, Mike. To your point, where's the pudding? Where's the beef? Okay? So that's one. President Trump and Secretary Bessent have said it is a matter of national security for the United States to achieve or get a leadership position in artificial general intelligence. They think it's 5 to 7 years away, and the number one building block is cheap energy. Hence his deal with Carney's old shop in Cameco. 2 Canadian companies are doing it in the United States, but oh my God, we can't do it up here.
Well, sorry, Jim, I've got to add to and re-emphasize what you're saying, because you've been on top of the AI trade from the get-go, but it's an energy trade too. The point you're making now, I just want to make sure Canadians are clear.
It is the energy trade.
Yeah,
it is. So it's uranium, it's nat gas, right? It's all these critical minerals, right? It's and what that. Well, let me just be more frank. It's cheap electricity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And so all of these hyperscalers and, to generate all this stuff, it chews up a lot of power. So we need power, right? That's full stop. But to get that done, it's going to take us 5 years. Think about that.
It's the same. Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say the same.
And so 7,000 in the S&P this year, 8,000 next year. The growth is in anything focused on AI. Energy, commodities, semiconductors, software, power grid, pipelines, anything. Because we might dither up here, Mike. The Americans aren't going to dither. Okay? This is a matter of national security. And on the other side is, look, gold at 4,000, right? We talked about Bitcoin and gold being the same, sort of the two-headed monsters. Gold has had a wonderful trade to 4,000 or 4,400. Look, there's still room in the trade, but it needs to breathe. Do you understand?
Yes.
So there is no rush if you want to allocate more capital. Gold leads Bitcoin by about 2 months. So if you and I had a $50 to invest right now, I'd say wait on investing in gold. I still love it. put it into Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is going to catch up to gold. And I would suggest to you, between now and your conference in early February, Bitcoin is going to have a run. And isn't it always funny, Mike, that when we go to your conference, Bitcoin, is really high, what comes into your conference on such a strong bull run. So that's what I would suggest. Now, lastly, if Carney does not deliver, the global capital markets have had it with us. I can't say that strongly enough.
And yet I can't think of
the heck out of Canada if Carney does not come through in the next 3 weeks.
Well, I'd say that, sorry, just one little aside because it drives me crazy, is I can't find anybody in the political commentariat who understands that, or at least maybe they do and they never mention it. They don't know we're operating in a global capital market. They don't know that we're in competition, to borrow money and all the things you've just alluded to. But as I say, that's just my little pet peeve there. And I think, people can hear why I'm so excited to have James Thorne join us at the World Outlook Conference. Tickets available as of Saturday, November 1st. So whenever you're listening to this, get on and get your ticket. Jim, as usual, what a pleasure getting a chance to chat. I look forward to seeing you in person.
Yes, it's been too long, Mike. Too long.
Great stuff. You can find him at Dr. J Strategy on Twitter, but also Wellington-Altus Chief Market Strategist James Thorne.